Nisa Blackmon. I am from Oklahoma originally, although I've lived in Illinois for quite some time now. I did my early studying at Oklahoma State University, and I have 2 science degrees from there. But then about 10 years after my last one, I went back to school for a degree in metalsmithing at the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana. So did that in 2010. And currently I'm the general biology lab manager at Illinois Wesleyan University, but I'm stepping away from that to be a full-time artist this spring. These pieces they're a mix of materials. I do a lot of mixed media work, but the primary element of these frameworks is basically steel baling wire. It's about 16, 20 gauge steel wire. It's pretty easy to work with, and it's really fast to cut and solder and bend and move. And so it's like, I'm not much of a mark maker, so when I work like this, I feel like it's the closest I ever get to drawing. They're kind of like three-dimensional drawing in space kind of thing. So they're frameworks like that, and the frameworks themselves, like I said earlier, they sort of reference things that I saw on that trip: fences and silos and billboards and barns and things like that, or you might see just elements of those within the framework. So they're volumetric, they're very open, but they have a lot of intersecting lines and parts, sort of as if you were seeing various aerial views of our landscape around here. So dividing lines between sections and farms and different things like that. The materials that go into them are, just a gamish of kind of things that I picked up over the years. Some things that I actually purchased on that trip. We would go to junk markets and flea markets and things like that and pick up lots of things that I can cut up and destroy and turn into other things. So old tin and scraps of fabric and different things like that, but also just stuff that I've picked up that is non-traditional materials, things that make you kind of say, ooh, I wonder what that would look like if I cut it up and mounted it this way. So anything from, old advertising banners to countertop material samples, flooring samples, old tins, love old tin. I'm thinking about incorporating some enameling into it as well. So again, for that sort of splash of color. But it's just things that I use for formal considerations, a wide array of materials, but that might bring suggestions or references that other people could pick up on to the work. So I like when I work this way. To me, it is very narrative, but I like to leave room for other people's stories as well. And so I'm trying to use materials that don't scream, any one particular thing, but because they have content and layers and memories of their own, they're things that other people might be able to relate to and sort of bring, somebody else could bring something to the work as well. Paul Klee is an artist that I've been aware of for quite a while, and he had a poster print up of some of his work in my house. But his work, I really respond to a variety of things about it. I'm interested in the time that he was working, the 30s and 40s, I think, if I got that right. Is just a tremendously interesting time to me historically, and so what he was doing at that time is something I'm really interested in learning more about. But also just the formal qualities of his work. I appreciate the way he uses color. I appreciate his overall sense of composition. I like that he's a little bit abstract, he's a little bit recognizable, a little bit representational. I always like the sort of the tug of war between those two things, or the dichotomy between those two things. I love the sense of architecture that I get from a lot of his images, even if they're not specifically of buildings. They often look like erector sets. I'm thinking of some of his more linear drawings and prints with these sort of fantastical structures, and sometimes there's little figurative elements and things going on with them that I think are very whimsical but have also a kind of an odd gravitas about them. So some of his pieces that I really like are the ones that look like sort of ruins or cityscapes or a landscape with things in them, and they're like I said, there's a sort of an element of fantasticalness to them, but also you can tell that they're grounded in actually looking at buildings and space and land and things like that. So So yeah, I think that's the sense that the sense of space and landscape and built structures that I get from them that I really enjoy. The work that I'm going to bring to this exhibition is it's about memory and perspective, and those topics sort of contained within these linear frameworks with elements of color and reclaimed materials, hung, suspended from, contained within those frameworks. This body of work began several years ago on like a 3-day driving trip between here and Oklahoma. I was going home to see family, and we split it into a couple of days, and the trip really separated itself into sort of these 3 areas based on what was happening with the weather and the time of day and the colors that were whizzing by outside the windows, and they were all very distinct and clear, and for some reason that just really struck me, and I started sort of taking notes about what those things looked like and what where we were and what I was seeing and what the colors looked like, and I was curious as to how the act of moving through space is somehow akin to the act of remembering. Sometimes when you're driving down the road and you see like a line of telephone poles, stretching across the horizon in front of you, when as you drive up to them, they have one appearance, but when you drive by them, then they coalesce on one another, and then when you pass them, then they split apart again. And so that sort of change in appearance was somehow linked to the idea of perspective to me, and not only perspective in terms of visual perspective, but also the kind of perspective that we gain with our memories. So you have one sort of memory of something when it has just happened, and then that memory is mutable and it can change, and you gain a different perspective as you get farther away from it. So it's that idea of sort of, again, moving through space and how that might link up to the idea of remembering. Scientists and artists do very much the same thing. So we ask questions about the world, we try to answer those questions in a variety of ways, we present the outcomes of that research to the world, and then we start over. Our questions lead us to different questions, and it just goes on from there. So to me, they're very, very, very similar endeavors at heart, just with sort of different parameters and different outcomes. I'm really interested in the process of science, the culture of science, the trappings of science, the materials of science, the things that we use every day as scientists, and those things will creep into my work in various ways. Even if I'm not really thinking about scientific topics, sometimes you see those little things pop up here and there.